Before I start formally, let me share a little joke. As I was sitting there, I remembered an old story we were told back home. There's a bird in my place we call Vinom Tokte. It means the woodpecker. Now, the woodpecker had this thing about when, he pecks wood for a living. And he said that when his mom dies, he's going to peck the best wood and craft the best wood to inter the mom. Unfortunately, the day the mom died, he had a boil on his beak, and so he couldn't do as he planned. I've been privileged to speak about cybersecurity on a lot of podium in a lot of places, and I was actually looking forward to speaking in front of my people, being a homeboy. Unfortunately, the technical glitches threatened me, but as a Port Harcourt boy, the resilience will keep me going, and by God's grace, we will deliver. So my name, as was introduced, I am Dr. Sibe, and I'm a cybersecurity practitioner in a very modest way. Been privileged to do this over 20 years. And my topic, I'll be speaking on emerging threats and countermeasures. Okay, so emerging threats and countermeasures, building cyber resilience in Nigeria's rapidly evolving threat landscape. First of all, let me introduce where I'm coming from, but before I do that, I almost broke protocol. Let me respectfully recognize the Managing Director of the Niger Delta Development Commission, and also respectfully stand on all protocols that have been beautifully established before we started today. So, just to introduce a bit of the company where I work, I'm the lead forensic examiner and the CEO of Digital Footprints Nigeria Limited. We're a cybersecurity company and also do digital forensics, actually a pioneer in that space where we run the first properly structured digital forensic laboratory in Nigeria. So we do a lot of things from computer forensics to mobile forensics, to network forensics, incident response, cloud forensics, and a whole lot. We also help organizations set up laboratories. In terms of cybersecurity consulting, we do advisory management and advisory consulting services, things like cyber risk assessment, vulnerability assessment, incident response, and so on and so forth. Other things we do include training, data analytics, information governance, and a whole lot. So, having laid that background, let me start formally. The last 2 decades have seen unprecedented growth in technology adoption across different sectors. Institutions continue to embrace digital transformation in driving profit and operational excellence. While this has come with improved efficiency and productivity, it has also brought associated cybersecurity risk. You had Dr. Dawson talk about things like the social media now being part of the threats landscape. The threat landscape is ever evolving, and so includes a lot of things. He mentioned Saudi Aramco. I sat near an oil expert, and we had that conversation even before we came here. Sometimes when we talk about cybersecurity, people think it is only for those who are computer experts. No. We talk about Internet of Things. Some of you, your doors are controlled remotely, your bulbs are controlled remotely. Anything that has potential to communicate remotely also have potentials to also be disrupted remotely. So it means that the attack surface, which is the possibility and the totality of channels and means for which a device can be attacked, it widens and there are more possibilities. The complexity and sophistication of the emerging threat actors have resulted in an exponential growth of cyber attacks, both in the continent and beyond. If you put the slide of cost of cybercrime slide, a report by the World Economic Forum Center for Cybersecurity shows that nearly half of all businesses have been hit by economic crimes. On top of this is actually cybercrime. Now, this continues to have increasing impact in global economies. Analysis by statistics shows that the global cost of cybercrime is expected to rise exponentially in the next 4 years from 9.22 trillion in 2024 to an estimated 13.82 trillion by 2028. This is expected cost of cybercrime globally. Also, the World Economic Forum, in a recent report, that's the Global Risk Report 2024, listed cybersecurity as the 5th risk type in the risk outlook for 2024. So a whole list of various risks identified, by industrialists, by bankers, and all kinds of people, identified cybersecurity as the 5th most disturbing risk factor in 2024. You can also put up the risk landscape slide. The Federal Bureau of Investigation Internet Crime Report recorded a total of 880,418 complaints, resulting in a total loss of about 12.5 billion. Total loss, and this is an annual loss. Now, some of you may already be wondering, maybe this is just an American thing. But I tell you, this is not limited to America. In a report by the Nigerian Communications Commission, a 2022 report, they identified cyber attacks as one of the significant risks against digital transformation. We've all been talking about digital transformation, and I love the very beautiful initiatives made by the Commission in equipping youths of this region. And as we'll see later, you'll see that there is a big gap, a big skills gap in that area. So cybersecurity risk is identified as the top risk that is threatening the quest for digital transformation. Now, the report states that Nigeria loses approximately $500 million per annum. $500 million per annum. But I'm sure because the reporting is not made very public, that's why you probably don't know. A lot of the institutions you are affiliated with, either by way of banking with or having some kind of handshake with, suffer cyber attacks and cry quietly, in most cases. Now, this contributes to about 0.08% of the annual GDP in terms of loss to annual GDP. Now, this is quite a dangerous trend, particularly with a large number of Nigeria's youthful population largely unemployed. More than 60-70% of our population are youthful, and a lot of them are unemployed. And there's a disturbing trend now because there's a lot of availability in terms of what they know as crimeware as a service, where even somebody who is not an IT expert can perpetrate cybercrime because the tools are readily available, even with instruction to use, and in some cases with money-back guarantee, which means if it fails, I'll refund you your money. So that's why you see a whole lot of people out there into cybercrime. So, what is the major trigger? It'll be incomplete if we look at cybercrime without looking at some of the major triggers. On top of it is the rapid technology adoption, the fact that technology has been rapidly adopted in Nigeria and even in the rest of the world. So if you go to the slide that look at digital adoption, you'll see a series of infographics which I will just summarize for lack of time. Now, in terms of digital adoption, there are about 8 billion population in terms of the world population. Out of that, unique phone subscribers are about 6.61 billion, and individuals who use internet is about 5.3 billion. So a large chunk of the world population actually have access to some digital device, and in particular, a phone. Almost on an annual basis, there's a plus 0.9%, which is almost a 1% increment in terms of number of new users, in the digital space. In terms of device ownership, about 97% of world population have some kind of, mobile device that's accessible to them. And like I established earlier, the more these devices, the more the propensity of cybercrime, and also the more likely you might be vulnerable, you might be a victim of it. In the next set of slides, I don't know which one you're seeing, you'll see a beautiful slide that slopes up, which shows the adoption from 1990 to 2024. From 1990, where we had about 2.6 million, to 2024, where we now have adoption, internet use, total of 5.347. This beautiful statistics is from We Are Social, a group called We Are Social. Then in terms of the nature and frequency of complaints, the next set of slides where you have the FBI Complaint Center also shows us the increasing curve in terms of number of cybercrime complaints. As at last year, a total of 12.3 billion complaints, this is the FBI Center, was made in terms of cyber security or cybercrime. And in terms of countries, when I've been saying the US, sometimes we say, oh yeah, it's a US problem. But if we look at the top 20 countries that has made these complaints, Nigeria is part of them. So this is a hotbed of cybercrime. And I'm very glad that NDDC is here because I'll say some things I probably skipped in saying in my book because we're trying to paint a good image of the country. But the situation is actually worse than we know. So Nigeria is part of in fact, Nigeria has the top 3 at 1,779. Canada is number 1, India is number 2, Nigeria is number 3. So this is quite disturbing. Also, coming back home in terms of adoption, how many of you remember the number of phone lines available, say, by 1999? There were less than 500,000 phone lines in Nigeria, however epileptic they were. As at today, there are over 224 million phone lines, which means that we have a tele-density of about 103.66%. That is, for every Nigerian, we have more than one phone if we share all our phone lines to every single Nigerian. That's beautiful in terms of adoption, but also that portends a real crisis, particularly when our level of readiness, particularly from a forensic point of view and a cybersecurity point of view, is very abysmal. So we move on. Having established the growing adoption in terms of use, we now move on to the threat landscape in Africa before we drive down, to the Nigerian space. So you take to the slide for threat landscape in Africa. Business email compromise. This is they distilled a report from the Interpol Africa Threat Assessment Report 2023, which the Interpol has been handshaking with a lot of national policing institutions, and they've come up with a very beautiful report. And you have top on the list of threat actors in Africa as the business email compromise. We have phishing attacks, ransomware attacks, banking trojans and stealers, online scams and extortions, crimeware as a service where, just as you go to a supermarket to buy Indomie, to buy a pack of pen, so also young boys go to the internet and buy a tool, for instance, that if they send to you, it mirrors your screen. If you click on it, everything you're doing, they're seeing on their screen. So it's as easy as that. It's as cheap as $10, $20. So it is something that has been liberalized, and there's access to everyone. So there are other things around the space, the geopolitical concerns, espionage, and sabotage of critical infrastructure. Also a very fantastic report by the KPMG also pointed to business email compromise, BEC, as the top threat in Africa. We also have ransomware, and sometimes you look at these things as the Western grammar. But I tell you as a practitioner and as someone who does forensics that this thing is right next door to you. As a matter of fact, I took a call yesterday on a very, very crucial, a similar case that's very crucial. So we go to business email compromise. It accounted for the most losses worldwide. The US corporations lost about $2.4 billion in 2022. It results in a lot of things, including reputational loss. Imagine, if your website is defaced or things that defame your business is put out there because someone intercepted your mail and took control of your mail. In Africa, several fantastic operations took place. Operations Delilah, these ones were largely in Nigeria. I'll just move straight on. Phishing attacks also are a major concern. Again, for want of time, I will just try and skip some. So you have also the graph by a group known as Anti-Phishing Working Group, which shows the gradual rise of phishing attacks in Africa. What's phishing? When you go fishing, you put a bait on the hook and you drop it in the water, and a prey thinks it's food and goes to eat it and gets hooked. That's the same thing. I send a mail to you, or you see a mail particularly from your mother or from your spouse, telling you that, oh, I've attached the receipt, for the thing you asked me to buy, and you go and click it, and it unleashes it. It has a payload that unleashes, things that perhaps may compromise your system or lock your data or steal your data. That's phishing attack. It's one of the top, threat actors in Africa. The next is a chart, a pie chart showing breakdown from a sectoral point of view, which I will try to skip, in view of the time considerations. Ransomware attack also is top on the list in Africa, and there's a lot going down here in terms of ransomware attack. The African victims are being targeted globally, and there are a lot of statistics available, which I would also try not to go into it for want of time. The most targeted nation is South Africa with 42%, Morocco with 8%, Botswana and Egypt with 6%, Tanzania and Kenya with 4%, and then, like I said earlier, there's a general problem of poor reporting. The next is banking Trojans and stealers. That's very common and particularly very disturbing in the African landscape, and in particularly the Nigerian landscape. And then another is the crimeware as a service, which I've dealt extensively with. Ransomware as a service, business email compromise as a service, phishing as a service, DDoS attack as a service, and so on and so forth. So I'll skip straight to the challenges. What are the basic challenges that we face? Lack of cybersecurity awareness. Like I said, a lot of persons look at cybersecurity as some complex technological thing. But if you have a phone, you're potentially vulnerable. If you have a phone, you yourself could be a threat if you have the know-how. And everybody here, I believe, we all have a phone. We all have a smart wristwatch. All of these are potentially, vulnerable. They are potential targets to the underworld. So there is a serious gap. And in fact, this is the most important. So we look at these things largely from a technical point, but there's also the non-technical point, which is general level of awareness. If we come here, we say, oh yeah, we put up a free hotspot. Feel free to hop in. It's good, we like free things. But you see that free Wi-Fi that you're using, it's very easy for a hacker to just stroll into your system and compromise it. So don't jump on any free Wi-Fi. Some persons don't even know the definition of cybercrime. They probably think it's just internet fraud. There are also other kinds of cybercrime, taxonomies. There's also cybersecurity skills gap, and I'm very glad that the Commission is doing a lot about this. And so let me dwell a little bit more in that. So there is a very disturbing trend in terms of total number of experts in Nigeria. Nigeria has one of the poorest number of cybersecurity experts in the world, with just around 8,000 plus for a population of over 200 million. So when the MD was talking about the fact that if you know and have this skill set, you are as good as employed because you can create jobs for yourself, he wasn't just talking. I can tell you very clearly that yes, if you have the skill set, in fact, come to me, I will help you, I will guide you on how to apply, and you will get the job. And here are the statistics to support me. There are about 4 million unfilled cybersecurity roles globally, about 4 million vacancies as we speak. There are about 54,000 in the US government alone. They want to employ, they can't get. And so when Dr. Dawson was talking earlier, he told you how the US government goes down even to the universities to map out their curriculum to fit the job descriptions which they have. So if they have a job description of a cybersecurity analyst, they map it to their curriculum. So it's not just teaching things, theories all over the place, but actually tailoring it to serve their unique purpose. You saw all those logos of Department of State, of Department of Defense, and a lot of all those handshakes. Yes, those are agencies actually looking for manpower, and so they go to the universities to set up those handshakes. Illinois Institute of Technology, for instance, has those partnerships. University of the Cumberlands has those partnerships. I was in their lab, and they have heavy presence of those entities. Capitol Technology University in Maryland, they have those institutions that they go down up to the curriculum level to try and fill this gap. And that is what Nigeria needs to do. There is a big gap here, a very alarming gap. I have put up job adverts in the last 3 years, twice, and I didn't get anybody from the Niger Delta that applied. And that's an indictment on the several universities we have in the region. That's an indictment on the 3 or so tertiary institutions we have in Rivers State that we do not have, because I know it's not because Rivers people don't want to apply, or Bayelsa people don't want to apply, or Delta people don't want to apply, but because they do not have the complex and very intricate skill set which is needed out there in the industry. So if there is one thing we should take out of here, is the fact that we need to bridge the cybersecurity skill gap. There's also a low level of cybersecurity readiness and capability maturity. If you do a survey here, and I even ask the simplest, from the simplest, to say, what do you understand by cybersecurity? You'll be surprised at how poor the level of awareness is, let alone going deeper to cybersecurity readiness and capability maturity. We are at the infancy stage. There's also high cost of cybersecurity investment. This is a challenge. These things are very, very expensive. An average tool in my lab costs around $10,000 per annum, and there are several licenses of those tools. So for Alamina or Abie or Barida or Amadi, who wants to be an entrepreneur and wants to start up, how is he able to equip his lab when he doesn't have the funds? So this, again, is another thing before, and I'm very glad, again, that the visionary leader of the commission is here. So these are some of the things we need to begin to look at. Because I assure you, if you have these skill sets, you will get the job. I am based in Nigeria, but I'm the visiting fellow in University of South Wales in the UK. I'm also a dissertation chair in cybersecurity, in capital technology in Maryland. That's because I have the skill set. They didn't force me to say, you must come over. So if you have the skill set, you will be ready. In fact, those 3 million jobs out there would come chasing you. So this is a challenge before us. Then lack of collaboration. Cybersecurity is a cross-border crime. So if you look at all of the EFCC annual reports in terms of the cybercrime attacks, you see that a lot of it is denominated in dollars. Over 95% is denominated in dollars because it is a cross-border crime. So for you to chase down a criminal, a cyber criminal, most times you need to cross and handshake several jurisdictions. And there are complexities of cross-border investigation. So for you to overcome that, there has to be a lot of handshakes and collaboration. Also, poor legislation. We have a Cybercrime Act that reads, still talking about 100,000. You see a cyber criminal gets a fine option of 100,000. What is 100,000 when he stole $1 million? So cybercrime, very static laws we have, is a challenge. Digital forensic readiness of law enforcement agencies in the country. Very low level of readiness, and a core part of this is what inspired the book which I wrote, because I did a research that actually exposed the very low level of readiness. I won't dwell too much on this. And then the rapidly evolving threat landscape. So we look at the recommended countermeasures. These are the challenges. We thought about the threat actors, and we looked at the challenges itself, and now we want to talk about the recommended countermeasures. Building cybersecurity readiness. You need to build a very high level of cybersecurity readiness, and this has to do with people, technology, processes, data, and all of those things that make you ready in terms of being able to be resilient, being able to proactively prevent this, and being able to investigate, because there is no 100% system. If you are breached today, how can you guarantee that you're able to investigate in a forensically sound manner, in a legally defensible manner, knowing that it could end up in court? Also, we need to invest in cybersecurity. If you look at, if we all write the names of our organizations here and we ask, how much do you spend on cybersecurity? Some would say 100,000, some zero, some 1 million. But you see, we need to elevate the expenditure of cybersecurity because it is growing in terms of the risk impact. Research and development. Dr. Dawson did a very beautiful thing in his intro. We need to invest in research and development. I would expect, organizations to open professorial chairs for private sector, because a lot of these things can also be handled by private sector. There's a beautiful story of what catalyzed growth in the Silicon Valley area. It was a certain Professor Terman who at the time was hired. In fact, they are the ones who ended the Second World War, because the Germans were better in terms of shooting down their planes. So they needed to evade their very powerful radar system. So Professor Terman was hired to actually lead a group of researchers, and they did a fantastic job, and that's how the Allied forces were able to evade the radar detection system. When Professor Terman came back to Stanford, where he was hired from, because he felt slighted that they didn't give the money to Stanford, but gave it to Harvard. So he decided to say, look, I'm going to grow Stanford. And he grew Stanford, and at the end of the day, he was pushing his students out, his best students out, rather than keeping them in. He was telling them, go and set up this company. Take this patent, take it, go and make money out of it. And so you had companies like HP, Hewlett-Packard, Cisco. All of those things came from the academia and grew what is now known as the Silicon Valley. So we can have such symbiotic relationship where the oil industry that is littered all over the place, agencies, the government, private sector, we can have that beautiful handshake and all work in terms of raising our level of readiness. Then on a personal level, cyber hygiene, we need to have better cyber hygiene, and then build forensic readiness of the law enforcement agencies so that law enforcement agencies can do their work. Then protecting enterprise infrastructure. This is now drilling down to the organization. We went from the continent to the nation, to the sector, and now to the organization. There are several methods. I saw a couple of my students here. I'm tempted to cheat, but I also saw people here who are not students, so I'll obey those who are not students, and then I'll just skip. But these are some of the strategies with which you can protect your enterprise infrastructure: deception, separation, diversity, commonality, depth, where you have defense in depth, discretion, collection, correlation, awareness, response. Each of these are slides on their own, but I will resist the temptation to talk about it. Also, in terms of emerging technologies, there are detailed measures for which you can protect each of them. You talk about cloud, you talk about the security issues. What are some of the issues of cloud technology? The fact that there is jurisdictional issues, the fact that you don't even know who you're giving your data to, and a lot of other issues. The fact that you are limited to what the cloud provider gives you, a whole lot of things, but I'm not able to go into the specifics because of time. Then contingency planning. These things will happen. When it does happen, what plans do you have? Incident response planning, disaster recovery planning, business continuity planning. We saw COVID strike, but in that COVID, who can tell me the industry or the sector that survived the most? The banking sector. Why? Because as part of their risk analysis, they knew how to do business continuity planning. It's normal day-to-day risk analysis in banking sector. The next that survived also is what? The oil and gas. Because they've done all their risk analysis and they know what force majeure is. But the average man on the street doesn't care about what force majeure is. They say, if you talk about that, they say, are you planning evil for me? So we need to have this from a cybersecurity point of view. And then information security governance. These are some of the soft issues, and the lawyers here, we had the data protection law, which was signed in June last year by the current president. This is bringing a lot of responsibility in terms of data processors, and the commission is one of them because you deal with a lot of personally identifiable information. So what steps are you taking? Because the data protection law actually puts a lot of responsibility on the data processor, that you have to take very concrete measures to ensure that you protect data. Look at things like policies, standards, procedures, and guidelines. Common security policies, user domain policies, network policies, data privacy policies, data integrity policies, internet response policies, risk management policies, email policies, retention policies, remote work policies, and BYOD policies. We also had Dr. Dawson talk about bring your own device policies. So in the summary, what are the summary of steps to cybersecurity? One, cybersecurity assessment, user education and awareness. And I think, and I want to appeal to the Commission, a lot of your children, sir, are involved in the nefarious act of cybercrime. A lot of Nigerians, either knowingly or unknowingly, are involved. Last year alone, over 300 were convicted. They are 21 years, 18 years, 19 years. I could tell most of them doesn't even know they are doing this, what they are doing is illegal. So that is the challenge of speaking to them, the challenge of empowering them. Some of them know how to hack, but they don't know that I can also hack ethically and make money from it. So we need to carry on this message to our people, to our young ones, to say, look, this thing is actually a crime. And some of them say, oh yeah, there's a fine option, I just pay and go. But they don't know that they are actually ex-convict. It's a plea bargain, so which means you agree that you did the crime. So we need to carry on with this message to our young ones. Also, network security, physical security, application security, and then information security governance. On a personal note, patch OS and other software regularly, set up threat monitoring solutions, set up web and email filter, access third-party vendor risk and incident management, and then secure teleworking policy. The Commission has offices in 9 states of the Federation and a liaison in Abuja. It means that they probably have ways of handshaking, which means that there has to be extra steps that will be taken. A lot of us also are subscribed to portals, and maybe university portals or your company portals. We need to, put in place safety and security measures. So on this note, I have tried to skip as many as I can. Let me thank the organizers as well as the sponsors for this. I believe this will be a continuous process, so we can always keep coming back to do this. Thank you and God bless.